They're not fulfilling their obligations. Why? They're trying to turn the actual situations that will arise from certain policies Israel might implement in the region to their advantage. That's why they're not fulfilling their existing forces, or the terms of the agreement. They're looking for the Qibla elsewhere. It's lost its Qibla. Where is it looking? It's looking in Israel. It's clear and simple. Israel is looking for its Qibla. Here, it says its direction is Ankara and Damascus. It means you should come to Ankara and Damascus, and recognize it. Of course, it says you'll integrate. It says you'll unite. It says you'll somehow move your army together with the Syrian government. But what is the SDF doing? As I mentioned earlier, the SDF, which is still maintaining that force and looking for a foreign patron in the region after being surprised by Cyprus, wants to turn the possible policies its foreign patron might develop in the region to its advantage and perhaps declare independence. Now, today, Tom Barak made a statement. He made a statement yesterday. What did he say? He said it was under the Federation. Now, see what we understand from this. Now, in this region, Zafar Bey just mentioned the situation of this region. Now, in this region, whether you call it a federation of 6, or twice that, the various formations that might emerge here will eventually separate after a few years. A few years later, they'll demand independence. So, that won't last long. So, here, you call the SDF a sub-federation structure. Accept it. A year later, they'll say, let's be independent.
I have a question. If this sentence in particular is unsheathed, there will be no need for pen and words. We can
come back suddenly one night. I'll ask it now. Especially in the last couple of weeks, he's been expressing it differently. Like, well, an operation, you know, it's come up again after these statements. Would you expect something like that? Is there a possibility? If the shard is unsheathed, there will be no need for pen and words. In other words, once we unsheath the shard, diplomacy is finished. Diplomacy is currently being conducted. It's being said that Mr. Hakan Fidan and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Syria made a joint statement. I called him a final call. That was the final call. So, it was the final call, but right now, patience is still the policy. A continuation of the policy of patience, but how long will this continue? The sword could unsheath at any moment. In addition, this sentence is very important. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Zafar.
Now, Mr. President has actually sent very clear messages here, and as my interlocutor said, it's actually the Syrian arm of the terrorist organization. Look, those who turn their attention to Ankara and Damascus here will win. This carries profound meaning. First, he says, an equation without Turkey and Damascus at its center has no chance of success. In other words, he's telling the terrorist organization, don't dream. Those who stray from their two Qiblas and seek new foreign patrons. Therefore, the old boss is
no longer with them in this region. So, who is their old boss? The United States, they say. They are the same people who abandoned you.
Looking for a new boss, but this won't be a solution for you either. Quote, and most importantly, if the sword is unsheathed, there will be no need for pen and words. You've gone too far, Mr. President says. You've gone too far. We're at the end of our patience, and this means that everything that can be said diplomatically has already been said. Everything that can be done has been done. If they follow Israel here and get carried away by empty dreams, the necessary action will be taken. Turkey has laid the groundwork for this. I understand from this conversation that when you look at this region, all the statements made and all the developments that have taken place show this. The course of history has changed here. Look, the actors in Syria who were there a few years ago are no longer there. Who is? Turkey is. Therefore, from now on, if you drag Israel there and adopt a friendly attitude towards Turkey, if you pursue empty dreams, the end will be disappointment. I think the third article should be underlined in bold. Sword is almost unsheathed. We understand this.
So, an operation could come at any time, and it will be almost a year. Isn't that right? December 8th, and December 8th is actually an iron fist in a glove against America, through Israel.
Bravo, sir. In fact, it's sending a message to America through Israel. When we look at Israel's history, its crimes, we know its potential, and ultimately, the state's population. It has an air force advantage, but we shouldn't separate Israel from the U.S. What's really meant here is that Turkey wants to significantly influence and direct the U.S.'s Syria policy. Because the U.S. is projecting a dual image. On one hand, there's the U.S. that recklessly uses Israel's security as an excuse to destabilize regional states, including Syria. On the other hand, there's the U.S. that, through the Turkish ambassador and special representative for Syria, advocates for a monolithic, unitary structure in Syria. Let's also
address Tom Barak's statements.
He has consequently changed his views and position. Of course, in a federation, it's actually a form of government. For example, there's a federation in Spain, there's a federation in Germany. The United States is a federal state. There are 50 states outside of it. There's a federation structure. Washington is running the Russian Federation structure. But we have the experience to know that when a federation is established in this region, it's the final stage before secession.
Professor, let's provide the full explanation. Now, the statements of the American ambassador, this ambassador to Ankara, have been widely discussed. I also looked at the Washington Post and other media outlets. Some specifically write, has America changed course? While there are others who say the opposite, that America has actually made its intentions clear. Barak says there needs to be a new structural model. Not a federation, but a structure a little below that allows everyone to preserve their own integrity, their own language, their own culture, and free from the threat of Islamism. He says, this is important again. Instead of a central state, a structure where everyone can preserve their culture. Of course. Can I also make an assessment? By the way, sir, this is it.
Now, last week, the Rent Corporation is a shadowy entity in America. Its president gave this very speech about these issues that Barak made. There were two notes there. One of them says that the SDF there is gaining time, and he has gained time, and he says this will be prolonged. And there was a meeting they held. There is a shadowy man. Sahin Abdi is the ringleader. He is very connected to America. He says he has contacts. He held a meeting. He gathered various separatist groups there and brought another word about the federation here, saying that the central government should be the Iraqi model. Now, this has been talked about a lot. You know the Iraqi model before. There was the Bekenlik man, who was with Biden.